Donald Trump is making enemies of the entire world, because what has happened hurts hard. It's completely arbitrary. Trump is defeating the United States, is what I mean to say.
Recently, Jeffrey Sachs revealed that Trump is harming the United States in regard to strengthening the BRICS alliance, one of the most counterintuitive parts of his foreign policy and ramifications of his foreign policy decisions. I want to see what Sachs has to say about this because he studied these issues extremely close. So let's take a look. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
How has Donald Trump's behavior specifically toward India enhanced the stability of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS? How has the president's basic ignorance of Economics 101 helped these international organizations that he's condemned?
Well, one could say that Donald Trump is uniting the world, but against the Trump administration. What Donald Trump is doing is making enemies of the entire world. And one of the enemies that he's made absolutely extraordinarily is India. India is the most populous country in the world, 1.5 billion people. It's a wonderful country in many ways and a rapidly developing country. And the United States has been building a stronger relationship with India for many years. And somehow Donald Trump got it into his head to wreck that relationship, I think, decisively. What he did was, even after his summit meeting in Alaska with President Putin, where he said that he was not putting on extra sanctions because we were aiming to negotiate a peace agreement over Ukraine, he nonetheless imposed punitive tariffs of 25 percentage points on Indian goods because India is buying oil from Russia.
Yeah, actually, I think it was 50% secondary tariff slapped on. And I think this is one of the biggest foreign policy blunders of this Trump administration. Actually, I think it was a great benefit of Trump's foreign policy in his first term when he warmed relations with India. He developed a close relationship with Modi, and now alienating Modi and India is one of the stupidest things that Trump's done this term, if you ask me. This was a real opportunity to peel off a nuclear power from BRICS and bring it into the fold of the West if possible. But Trump seems to have gone back on that and that kind of angle completely. That would have been a plausible angle, much like Nixon warming relations with China in the 1970s, something that certainly strengthened, the trading bonds between the United States and China and drove China out of the hands of the Soviet Union. There was a rift developing before that too anyways, but that is true. And sanctions only give tyrants, if we're not talking about India, but even a country that you detest and you don't want warmer relations with, like Iran, that gives them a propaganda tool to use against you and drum up support among the people within their country to be antagonistic toward your country. So when you do this with a supposed friend, it's even more counterintuitive because now you've alienated possible warm relations. I think it's a disaster.
And so are a lot of other countries, by the way. And the United States buys uranium from Russia, and Europe buys natural gas from Russia. But Donald Trump and one of his advisors, Peter Navarro, went after India. And they went after India in the most aggressive and obnoxious and ignorant way, with insults and trying to isolate India and castigate India for funding Russia's wars. And suddenly, I was shocked by the ineptitude of this, honestly.
Me too. I mean, this is so counterintuitive, it doesn't even begin to say it, because this isn't even going to change the situation on the battlefield at all. This is desperation. This is grasping of straws, while Trump also talks about security guarantees with Ukraine, which will tank any prospect of peace with Russia, too. So this is senseless. There's no reason for it, and it's not going to change the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine at all. Russia's still there. Russia's still occupying the Donbass.
But what Trump did was break to pieces actually years of diplomacy. Now, I have to say that I warned my Indian friends and senior Indian officials when I was in India this spring that the United States government, especially under Trump, is completely unreliable, and that one would not expect, and India should not build a long-term alliance with the United States, because the U.S. is not really an ally. It uses other countries, and now it uses them for extraordinarily short-term, cynical purposes.
Yeah, the stupidest thing you could do to India. Unpredictable is one word, unreliable, certainly so. The United States, under this administration, and Trump's not new to it, does a very good job at one thing: alienating potential allies in the world. And not only allies in regard to like military alliances, which I chagrin. I don't believe in maintaining entangling alliances, but trade partners, people that you develop warm relations with, not through isolationism, through trade and diplomacy, such that you don't go to war with them or other countries they trade with. That would have been advantageous. That would have been America first, not slapping 50% tariffs and alienating that nuclear power, by the way, driving them further into the hands of China and Russia. Such a stupid decision, if you ask me.
Trump's interest was to use India somehow to attack Russia, or to use India against China. Well, the Indians saw all of this. I've been in discussions with many Indian officials, and also in watching closely the Indian media, and having discussions and interviews with the Indian media outlets. The whole country is completely, totally furious, because what has happened, it hurts hard. It's completely arbitrary. It's been accompanied by completely nasty and gratuitous, disgusting thoughts about India. And the end of this is what we saw a few days ago: the warm embrace of President Putin and President Xi Jinping of China and Prime Minister Modi in Tianjin, China, at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Now, I want to say I don't begrudge cooperation among these countries at all, so I don't regard this as what some hardliners in the U.S. would do as a catastrophe. I'm happy that they're cooperative. What I'm not happy about is that we are driving all of these countries to be outright enemies of the.
Yeah, they've driven the cooperation of the BRICS countries, our criminal regime, our deep state, our foreign policy apparatus, certainly so, between funding the war in Ukraine endlessly, now, 7 to 8 months into Trump's term doing that, starting a new war with Iran, another BRICS country driving Iran and probably India, China, and Russia closer together, and now slapping on secondary tariffs. It's so senseless. There's no plausible angle to this, and I don't know that India can come back into the fold of being a warm country in relation to the United States. Even if that tariff is repealed, the damage is kind of done here.
United States, for no reason other than a complete incompetence. There's actually no tactics, no ideology. It's ignorance. I'm sorry to say, I've never seen anything like it, but it's complete ignorance of these people in the White House right now.
Yeah, I have to agree with them on that 100%.
And there we have it.
And there we have it will produce an economy. And again, correct me if I'm wrong. You're the scholar on economics, Professor Sachs. which will now allow this economy to be independent of the United States and ignore the United States dollar. Is that
Yes.
effectively correct? Whether you call it Shanghai Cooperation Organization or whether you call it BRICS, it's almost the same people. But they can trade among themselves without having to buy and sell dollars.
They're going in that direction anyway, because the dollar we regard as the way we buy and sell things, but the United States government came to regard it as the way we punish other countries. We punish them by putting on whatever penalties or sanctions we want. And we tell those other countries, if you don't follow what we say, we will cut your banks off from the dollar-based settlement system. So it's not that we're selling them more or doing something different. We're telling them, we're unilaterally going to stop you from using this payments mechanism.
Well, they're fine with that. I'm sure there's many ways around it. They'll now transact in renminbi or rubles or whatever they want to do to facilitate trade. And the big threat to this is moving in a general direction to adopting a new currency, a currency that's prevalently used to the extent that it becomes a new world reserve currency. That's the big threat here. The US dollar is still, despite its inflationary characteristics, almost all fiat have those characteristics. It still is the world's reserve currency, generally speaking. But if that becomes untrue at some point due to these evaporating relations with the US and big superpowers like India and China and Russia, that could be displaced sometime soon. That's the big catastrophe potential that would completely annihilate the US economy, certainly so.
Well, I can also tell you it actually happens to be one of my specialties from way back when in my economics professional life, that you can make alternative payments mechanisms. I helped to design other countries' currencies that were introduced. You don't have to pay in dollars. You can pay in rubles. You can pay in renminbi.
Right.
You can create all
That's basically, I said the same thing. That's crazy.
sorts of ways to get around these sanctions, which the United States unilaterally and arbitrarily imposes on others, not as part of rules of the game or agreements or negotiations, but because Trump thinks of it one day because Peter Navarro has told him something. And so these other countries are saying, first of all, we don't need the United States for our trade. We have things they need, like rare earth magnets, which if we stop exporting them to the U.S., will shut down U.S. industry. They don't have what shuts us down. So they realized that all of this bluster about the trade wars just put the U.S. into a corner that it put itself into.
Totally agree with him on the trade war. It's counterintuitive. It only benefits U.S. citizens to trade for goods that are cheaper or superior in their eyes, in the eyes of the consumer, regardless of whether they're in Kansas or in Shanghai. That's helpful to consumers. We benefit from them immeasurably. They say it harms workers because then jobs aren't more in the United States, especially manufacturing jobs. But in the end, we use those products from overseas in input products in our own firms too, and workers benefit more than anyone by cheap goods and services. Expensive goods and services are running people into bankruptcy and a punitive taxation system, certainly so. But he's right, there's other mechanisms that they can use to avoid it. And this won't stop trade between the United States and India, not by a long shot. They still want U.S. software, which is, a booming industry in the United States. There are some goods that they'll still want to import from us, but they will be more incentivized to trade within their own hemisphere rather than with the U.S. now after this, certainly so. And it ultimately hurts U.S. consumers to put more taxes on us for Indian goods that we choose out of our own volition.
Trump's losing the trade war badly, and he's uniting the rest of the world. And he is isolating the U.S. geopolitically and economically. He's making the U.S. economy less competitive, and he is driving the rest of the world away from the US dollar. And one of the implications of that is interest rates in the US are rising. The 30-year rate is today, it rose again, and it's about 5 percentage points. It's risen very significantly. And
well, the Fed's probably going to chop down the main rate, probably 25 basis points either this month or next month, though. So, interest rates in some regards have risen, but historically, they're not that high. I mean, ask your parents what interest rates were like in the late 70s and early 80s, and these interest rates look like a cakewalk compared to that. We have artificially low interest rates still, probably because of inflation. Look at how inflation has gripped food and fuel in the last few years, and there's a lot of talk about lowering interest rates. I think it's foolhardy to lower them so much. It's going to just inspire more malinvestment. But, it is true that rates somewhat have been risen off their lows, which were ridiculously low a few years ago.
And this, of course, is another crimp on the U.S. economy and on its role internationally. China's interest rates are about 2%. We are.
And that's why inflation's still through the roof in China, and it's still through the roof in the United States, but everything's relative. But when you put interest rates that low, it inspires people to spend money and invest in money that they otherwise wouldn't have spent. That creates a bubble economy. This is what we call the Austrian business cycle, and that's what creates the boom and bust that we see about every 10 years in the United States. You didn't have that before the central bank. That is an invention of the central bank. There were panics and minor panics in the 1830s, and you had one in the 1870s, but they were short-lived. They weren't spurred about through economic intervention, and they didn't have the central bank manipulating interest rates for the country.
Facing big budget deficits and rising interest rates because others don't want to hold U.S. government assets anymore. They don't want to hold dollars anymore because they get taken away or they get confiscated. They get punished somehow. So this is very self-defeating. Or it's not self-defeating. Trump is defeating the United States is what I mean to say.
Yeah, I hate to say I largely agree with them. If anything, the U.S. foreign policy, and it goes back to Biden, it goes back to Obama and Bush, has alienated countries against the United States unnecessarily so. And I'm not just talking about, say, North Korea and Iran and Iraq during the Bush administration. I'm talking India, major trade partner. A guy or a country headed by a guy that was warm to Trump, that had glowing things to say about Trump, even as recently as a few months ago. Watch his interview with Lex Friedman, Modi's interview with Lex Friedman, and what he says about Trump. There's no reason these two countries can't get along diplomatically and economically, but for the war regime, but for the war hawks, the people that want economic nationalism and foreign interventionism to slap on these punitive tariffs to this country that's treated the U.S. well, despite the fact that the U.S. makes enemies around the world, especially with Russia and China in terms of superpowers. Now we have India too. The U.S. goes to war against Syria to depose Assad, to side with the Israelis. It bombs Iran. Both of those countries were BRICS allies, Syria and Iran, respectively. And we don't think there's going to be any ramifications. Well, there are, and it's sick. I think that this is one of the most overlooked stories, the alienation of India as a potential diplomatic partner in a world where the U.S. has few substantial diplomatic partners, especially among nuclear powers. It's about Israel, and that's it. Pakistan to an extent, I guess, if you could even say that. And I don't think that. I think Pakistan was duplicitous, in safeguarding bin Laden and other things. But that's another topic. But let me know down below, do you agree with Jeffrey Sachs? Is the India issue an overlooked one? Has Trump helped BRICS at the expense of the United States? What are the ramifications of this? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Judge Napolitano. Really appreciated this interview, and please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support my channel, and as a gift to you, I will give you access to all of my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.